Hi. So it used to be called 1 billion punches, believe it or not. And I went around collecting punches on a pad, get women to throw a punch, in the name of defiance. It was a little bit violent sounding, had a kind of marketing problem. And also some people would miss, and I was collecting too many blows to the head. And thanks for having me here today, to the organisers, and for you all sticking around for the afternoon session. I know it's tough. I'll try to be entertaining for you and tell you a little bit about the story and why I started 1 Billion Stronger. And it was really to not just raise awareness, but also to raise action. And would you like to just take part while we've got it fresh in our minds to contribute to the 1 billion salutes that I'm trying to collect from around the world? Would that be okay? Yep. Okay, awesome. So I'll get you to stand on up. And with the right hand, because this looks better for the camera, we have it stop.
I'm going to get a Twitter photo.
And the left hand is a fist. And we have a nice strong stance like that. So we're kind of squatting down. It's a nice strong stance. And it's all about the eye of the tiger. And I'll just leave it with you for a moment for the Twitterers. Thank you. Thank you. So, to prevent an act of violence takes courage and action. People ask why I do this, and it started in a very unlikely place, a dusty old boxing gym back in about 15 years ago in North Sydney. And I was teaching box out, which is fitness boxing. It's like getting fit, not hit, but we're doing it sort of in the authentic way. And more than half of my clients were women, which just goes to show that women love to punch stuff. And also, I taught a bit of self-defense there. So high schools would approach me and to teach some of the schoolgirls self-defense. So I was suddenly teaching self-defense to to 12 and 13-year-old girls. And one of the things that stuck in my mind most was some of the stories that they would tell. And I remember one particular story with a girl about 12 or 13 in year 7, and let's call her Courtney. She was in a supermarket, like a North Shore supermarket, and probably the frozen food section, but she was talking about how she got manhandled in this supermarket, like sexually assaulted, like in the middle of the day. It's hard to believe, and a lot of her friends hadn't heard the story, and I hadn't heard a story, and I was like, well, what did you do? And she said, well, that's what she did. She said that, and she did that. She did nothing, and she was frozen, of course. Whether it's through fear, embarrassment, humiliation, or just not knowing what to do in that situation. And stories like hers inspired me to look a little bit deeper into the world of self-defense, what we know as self-defense. And I've come up with a different term, more to do with self-empowerment, I believe, is more important. Self-defense, a lot of the women here might have been taught from their school days. Do you remember anything? Often people remember the sort of the eyes, throat, groin, stick the key between the fingers, don't talk to strangers. There's a lot of myths and misunderstandings, I believe, in the area. And a lot of it's very physical as well. And even though I'm coming from a physical background, teaching this sort of boxing fitness, I actually believe the best empowerment methods are non-physical, non-confrontational. Not non-confrontational, but non-body on body, if you like. I'm still talking about being strong, but using other skills in the lead up to that. So if we're getting to a stage where you actually have to have physical self-defense, then I think it's kind of getting a little bit late. There's a lot of things that can happen before that. So I'm talking about the psychology of self-defense. I'm talking about the red flag warning signals that lead up towards violence. And I think a lot of this has not been taught, it's very well researched, but it's not really out there in the world for people to know. So what do I actually teach? Well, the first thing I say in a workshop is it's never a victim's fault. It's always a perpetrator's fault. And the second thing I teach is that bullies and, what do you want to say? What do you want to call it? Abusers, thugs, rapists, whatever, are essentially weak at the core. And psychologists will often say that these people are very insecure, that basically they're cowards. And what they target and who they target are victims. That's why often like 80, 90-year-old people get beaten up and raped, and because they're targeting the weakest possible link. And they're looking for a victim. So a simple message is don't be a victim. Just don't be a victim. Don't look like a victim. Don't talk like a victim. Don't walk like a victim. Don't think like a victim. Don't be a victim. So how do you not be a victim? Well, I talk about you're stronger than you think is more than just like a tagline. It's more than a platitude. Women and girls actually do have all the strength that they need to prevent violence in an individual situation. Through their words, verbal self-defense. Call it tongue fu. Sorry about that. Sorry. Intuition. Red flags. A book called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. Amazing book. Talking about the lead up, how to predict and prevent violence. And also body language, physiology, eye contact. And that's the three main areas that I teach. Also use boxing as more of a metaphor for female strength and empowerment. There's a rumour going around we may be doing a little bit of that later. Not to scare you. So I packed my bags a couple of years ago after the Delhi rape. I don't know if you heard about the rape in Delhi a couple of years ago, and I went to India. And I spoke at the US Embassy in New Delhi to their staff. And this kind of generated its own momentum. And I ended up, rather than doing 2 workshops there, I did 40. I spoke to more than 10,000 women and girls across 4 states of India. And I spoke in colleges, in schools, in charities, in villages. And really just talking about those basic things that I mentioned before. I came back and went to Aboriginal communities and spoke to ran workshops in Balgo, Western Australia, in that area. I've also spoken in Africa, into Africa and Indonesia, Bali. Okay, actually I was surfing most of the time, but. So in the meantime, the statistics are still building up. You've all heard that 1 woman every week gets murdered by a partner in Australia on average. That's a statistic that's definitely been exceeded for this year, apparently. How many people do you think drown every year in Australia? Any guesses? Ballpark? Just a sort of... 50? 50? It's about 50 women, interestingly. It's about 300, roughly 300, about 50 of those are women. We do a lot of work for drowning prevention, don't we? We do a lot of... I live down in Manly. So nippers, like Sunday, everywhere, all over the place, the nippers. On every beach in Australia, practically, in the summer. Yeah, and we all value swimming and what a great skill that is to have. Well, it's 50, 100 drownings, 200 drownings. Sexual assaults, 40,000 a year in Australia. In the US, probably 1 million. That's 1 every couple of minutes. So it's not just India. So what else? I self-fund this pretty much. We had a couple more slides, maybe not. No, we've got some other ones. We'll go back. Maybe run through. Anyway, I self-fund it pretty much and get some crowdfunding. I had some corporate sponsorship in India, and I also do some team building. I did some with the Commonwealth Bank recently. So they had an empowerment, kind of female empowerment theme to the team building, and with a bit of punch. I added some gloves and some punching, and so there was like team building for a purpose. that sort of helps to fund it. Looking to go back to India to do that, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So I think I might open it up for some questions. Thanks, by the way, for doing the salute. I guess one final thing is people do ask me, is it working? Does it work? Do these strategies work? Well, it's a kind of difficult thing to measure. But I do know it's worth it. And when I was in India in an orphanage there a couple of years ago, I ran this workshop and a young girl came up to me, 12 or 13 years old, an Indian girl, and in her broken English, she said, "Thank you. This is the first time in my life I've ever felt confidence." Yeah, so, look, hi.
Hi. This area is not my area, and but so I lived in New York. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in lots of dangerous situations, and I know what you're doing, and I hear all that. But somewhere in there, you said something about not showing fear, and I wonder how it works in a domestic violence situation, where you're with a husband or someone that you trust, but then something goes wrong, and yeah, do you have a special area for that? Because yeah, I don't,
it's a good question.
It's so close and
the question is if you're living in a relationship, is there a what do you do when it all starts to go wrong? When it all starts to, you've been surprised and shocked by some new behaviour. Is there anything to do? Is that what pretty much?
Well, no, I'm just sort of, how do you use
the skills?
that
Which
you
skill?
teach
Okay.
in a domestic violence
Yeah, sure.
situation? Because I know in Australia now,
Yeah.
it's 1 in 20 relationships have got domestic violence,
Yeah.
and that's why a lot of women become homeless and
Yeah.
they leave.
It's an extremely volatile area. The whole topic is a very volatile topic, and there's I get a lot of questions. Being a guy, of course, I've been told to move over and let a woman front the whole thing, and there's a lot of different people doing a lot of amazing things for domestic violence. And I don't propose to have the solution for everything, but where my philosophy would come into here would be where I talked about intuition. I talked about listening to the early warning signs. Early warning signs in a relationship, even on early dates. So things like, and this is from The Gift of Fear, Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear, things like excessive jealousy, micromanaging, making someone account for their time, anger, jealousy, those sorts of early warning signs. And of course, what The Gift of Fear is really about, the gift of fear, the feeling, the gut feeling that something is not quite right. And following that is the next step, actually making a decision, getting out of a relationship early before you get in too deep. That's where I would fit in with that. Yes? That's a great question. And it's really the reason, one of the main reasons I did start this. Because what I think you're talking about, I don't even know if there's such a word as what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, victimology. And it's this kind of, the brochures in the community centres, of battered wives. And I know there's victims. I know we have to look after victims. I know there's people doing amazing things with the homeless shelters and everything. So I'm not in any way saying any of that is wrong. I'm just saying, let's just be positive. Let's, don't fool ourselves with positive thinking, but it's about strength, it's about building yourself up and saying you're not a victim. You do have a lot of strength inside you, and psychological studies show that people, bad attackers and whatever, target the victim. The Grayson-Stein study. I studied law originally, but now I study the cases for more to do with the criminality side of it. So Grayson-Stein study, for instance, was a fascinating study done. Have I got time? Am I okay for time? Because I'm just looking at that. Have I finished time? I have, pretty much.
No, just keep. I'm going to come in and I've got a couple of questions.
Oh, okay,
so you
great.
Keep going, Patrick.
Oh, just so a couple of psychologists in New York filmed bystanders. Pedestrians, I'm sorry, walking down the street, and they filmed them. And they took that, just random people, and they took that footage into one of the hardcore prisons in the United States, and they showed hardened criminals. I'm talking like serial rapists, murderers, assault, rape, etc., etc. And they said, who in this video would you target? And they came up with pretty much the same people. And it wasn't just based on gender. It wasn't just based on race. It was based on some other things like basically body language. It's basically purpose, walking with purpose, the ones who are walking with purpose, the ones who are walking with pace, purpose, presence, I think, were the 3 Ps. So those ones are less likely to be targeted. Good eye contact, good body language, etc. So that's just, it's kind of basic, but it kind of makes a difference, and that's my answer to that. That body language and positivity makes a big difference. And I think we need to emphasize that generally.
Okay, and I ask if anyone else has a question for Patrick, please make your way to a microphone. It's really hard to hear for the whole group if you're not on mic. So, but I just was interested, I mean, what you're talking about is education really, and educating people in how to defend themselves and those sorts of things, and body language. How much though is it, and some women do think that really it's more about men and educating men. The issue here is that it can potentially polarize genders against each other. So how do you actually answer that question? How do you actually make this an issue that is not women versus men, men versus women, but it's actually about finding a solution for the two to work together, and through education, those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's not about human rights. It's not about women's rights. It's about human rights. It really is. I mean, everybody has sisters. Everybody. I mean, women are great. We need women. Men need women. Women need men. I mean, we're just people. But gender violence is a specific type of violence, and people who know about gender violence know that it has a specific definition, and that those attacks take place because you are a woman. That's what gender violence is. So, how do we join up the sexes? I'm not sure, but I do know that certain strategies work. This is only one side of the strategy. Yeah, there's men that probably need education. They just don't come to my seminars, that's all.
Well, and that's the point, I guess, what I'm making is that, there's the danger of demonizing men and making them then feel like, defensive, or, why should I be the problem when there's two people, this person has done something to aggravate me. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I guess I think what you do is...
It doesn't mean you should hit them.
No, it doesn't. But I guess therein lies the education, how you do that. How do you get guys to come to your class?
Well,
I mean, that's a question too.
Well, the classes I run with guys are normally to do with fitness. So the guys are not coming to my women's self-defense workshops. And
do you ever talk about it with them in the context?
I don't invite them, no. It's only because it's a different workshop. Yeah. I wasn't prepared for the volatility of this topic when I started it. And I'm sure a lot of people have got different opinions. And the fact that I'm a guy is kind of weird, and I get all sorts of stuff. But all I'm trying to show is a few simple steps that have been proven in the research: intuition, body language, eye contact, assertiveness, Not being a victim, being strong, those things in the firing line, like when it actually happens in the Woolworths car park at 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, the weirdest time of all, whatever, and then some guy comes up and starts to hassle you out, and rather than doing what he wants, which is, come with me or get in the car or I'm just going to abuse you, you don't. You do the opposite. You speak up. You say, get your hands off me, back off, mate. And can you help me at the moment because this guy I don't know. Can you, ring on your phone? So speaking up and not being a victim. That's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about, having a fight necessarily. I'm talking about verbal self-defense as well.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that those tools have a place, and I think they're very useful. I think that some women feel more comfortable screaming out in public than others naturally.
Sure.
And women and men, I think there would be men that would feel that way too. I guess this goes to your point, and I don't know your name, but you didn't, yeah.
He wants to ask a question.
Yeah, I know, I've got that.
Okay, cool.
But the point of being in a domestic situation where, it's one thing to be attacked by a stranger or, an acquaintance, but being in a domestic situation where you've just made dinner and you're on the couch watching, Gogglebox, whatever, and all of a sudden you get punched in the head, what would you say to somebody like that? I think that's what you were getting at, right?
Well, I'd have to step it back and I'd say the simple message is to recognise the signs and learn and respond to them. Yeah. And it's much easier earlier. How to defend a punch in the head is maybe it's a slightly different workshop. I'm not suggesting a fight back, but I'm suggesting pick up the early warning signs and learn how to respond to them with assertiveness. Yeah. And it's recognise and respond. Prevention, also prediction, if you can predict it, there's a good chance you can prevent it. Can I?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say...
Hang on, can you say your name, please?
Sorry, Mark. Just wanted to say, I think your point, Patrick, is well made in that there's 2 workshops here, and this is clearly the workshop which is about building confidence and building a sense of response, if you like. There's clearly another space which needs to be addressed here, which is, and I think I was having a conversation with somebody today, the Are You OK campaign, there are some similarities between that campaign and perhaps what should be going on between men to stop the punch in the first place. And the best punch is the one that's never thrown. And I think there's a big gap at the moment in education around men talking to each other and actually asking each other, without judgment, is everything okay at home? And if that conversation can start to become common, people will start talking about it before it becomes a prolific issue. But I think what you're doing for confidence purposes, building and I guess creating that notion of unity and strength against the blind aggressor is fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a good initiative.
Thank you. Marilyn Snyder. Congratulations, Patrick, on the work that you're doing. I see the area that you're working in as one prong of a fork with many prongs. I'd like to ask anyone in the audience if there's anyone who could join with you in educating at the other end at the same time with a slightly different audience to help teach respectful relationships from a very early age. Put it out there.
Okay.
Okay, well, anyone who has that desire can speak to Patrick afterwards. Are there any other questions for Patrick? Yeah, can you please come to the... please come down to the mic. It just makes it easier for everyone.
I can yell, it's okay. It's fine. There's one guy on the mic.
If you feel that you can be heard, then fine.
Oh, yeah, come like one. Hi, Patrick. I'm actually incredibly surprised that there's so much violence against women, especially that it's increasing. I can quite comfortably tell you that anyone that harms a woman is not a man. And I don't understand how... I want to understand where is the disempowerment for a man to be strong enough to look after a woman, like we're meant to, as opposed to feeling like we have to compromise them as a really bad power trip. Does that make sense? Where are we getting disempowered from? Why are men acting like this?
And why is it getting more prevalent?
Yeah.
Or are we just hearing about it more? That's the thing. Has it always been really prevalent, but we just didn't hear about it? Or is it more prevalent? That's another thing.
I'm telling you, it hurts to hear this. It hurts me a lot. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you,
I
what do you-
don't.
what do you-
No, I'm not really an expert in that area. I know it's only a small percentage of men. So it's just picking up, as I say, it's recognising the warning signs of those particular men and not getting into a relationship with them. End of story. And you will hear it. People say, oh, I met this new guy, he's awesome, he's texted me 40 times on the first date. I say, get out. Because the signs come up again and again and again. So the media loves, the Telegraph, loves to put the throwing off the ceiling, throwing off the balcony, and the Lisa Harnham case, and they put all the violent bits in there, but they don't often really talk about the warning signs, the leading up. And if you read them, they're the same every time. Every single time they're the same. So pick them up. When you hear the warning signs and read The Gift of Fear, when you hear the warning signs and you hear your friends getting involved in those sorts of, tell them that's a red flag warning sign. How to respond? You don't have to get out. I'm not saying every time, but you need to know that this person is a high likelihood or a certain likelihood of possibly more trouble down the track.
Women can often feel flattered by that sort of attention, and they need to understand that it's actually completely the opposite.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there in the interest of time, but can you join me in thanking Patrick for his time today? Thank you.